Hear this story. A very long time ago, when the world was new, two children walked in God's garden called Earth. One was named Cain, the other Abel. They were the first children, the first brothers. Each brother had a special job. Cain was the farmer. He loved to dig in the earth and harvest the vegetables and fruits. He knew how to take the wheat of the field, grind it into flour, and bake bread. Abel was the shepherd. He liked to watch as his sheep grazed in the fields, and he gently guided the strays back to the flock. He would shear their wool and spin it into soft yarn to make blankets. Cain's hair was straight and coarse, like straw from the grain he planted. Abel's hair was soft and curly, like the wool of the sheep he tended. Cain noticed that when he was alongside his brother Abel, Abel reached only to his chin. Abel saw how large Cain's hands were compared to his own. But when they stood face to face, they saw that their eyes were the same color of chestnut. Every spring, Cain and Abel marveled at the birth of lambs and the ripening of wheat. In the cool of the evening, Cain wrapped himself in Abel's wool. Abel dined on Cain's vegetable stew. Late at night, wrapped in soft blankets and feasting, the brothers told each other their dreams. One day, Cain and Abel argued about whether it was better to be a farmer or a shepherd. Cain insisted that God loved the farmer best. After all, God planted the first garden, Cain declared. Well, Abel argued that God loved the shepherd best. After all, God created the animals and watches over them. Cain and Abel decided to pray to God. When Cain prayed, he brought with him a large basket of ripened vegetables. When Abel prayed, he brought his very finest sheep. Cain looked at his silent vegetables shriveling up in the noon sun, while Abel's sheep grazed happily in the field. Cain was certain that God must like sheep better than vegetables. Maybe God did like the shepherd better. Then Cain became anxious. He glared at his brother. That night, he didn't cover himself with Abel's blanket, and he didn't tell Abel his dreams. The next day, he didn't share his vegetable stew with Abel. Abel didn't understand why Cain was so angry with him. At night, Cain thought about how everything seemed so easy for Abel. If it weren't for his brother, he would be God's favored one. If it weren't for Abel, he'd be happy, content, fulfilled. Just thinking about it made Cain's face turn red like the beets he grew. "I hate you, Abel!" he yelled. Hearing Cain's words, Abel turned pale like sheep's wool. I hate you too, Cain," Abel shouted back in the dark night. From then on, whenever Cain and Abel met in the field, they turned their faces away from each other. For weeks, they could not look at each other in the eye. One hot morning, Cain was clearing some heavy rocks from the ground. A sheep from Abel's flock trampled on Cain's newly planted field. Abel was lying in the shade of a nearby tree, while his sheep grazed lazily. Cain tried to speak to Abel, but the words wouldn't come. Cain hated that his brother was resting while the sheep made a mess of all his hard work. Cain was so angry that he felt as if he were on fire. His heart was beating so strongly. He covered his ears to make the pounding stop, but it just got louder. He couldn't even look at Abel anymore. He could only stare at the ground. He noticed a large rock sitting by his feet. Without thinking, he lifted the rock, and instead of tossing it aside as he always did, he threw it at Abel, and he hit him on the head. Abel fell over and did not move. Cain called to him, but Abel did not answer. And it was then that Cain knew he had killed his brother Abel. He wanted to run away, but his feet wouldn't carry him, and his hands trembled, and the sky darkened. And he heard God's voice calling to him, "Cain, where's your brother?" Cain answered, "Am I my brother's keeper?" The rock that seemed so light a moment ago was heavy now in Cain's heart. The gash in Abel's head appeared as a mark on Cain's own head. Cain wished he could go back in time and take back his anger, take back the rock. He missed his brother. He felt ashamed. Abel would never grow up and have children. It was as if Cain had destroyed an entire world. The earth that had always felt warm and soft beneath his feet turned cold and hard. Where once fruits and flowers bloomed, only thorns and thistles grew. Cain couldn't farm anymore. He wandered from place to place looking for a home. Winter came early that year, and the trees wept leaves. All kinds of fruit fell before they ripened. Time passed, a long time passed. The world was not new anymore. People built cities and made homes there. But people often spoke angry words, and with angry words they threw rocks. And later they drew swords, and swords turned to guns, and guns to bombs. One killing became two, two became four, four became 16, 16 killings became war. Entire worlds were destroyed. But the people keep telling the story of Cain and Abel, the first children. They sigh as they read of Cain picking up the rock. They want to hold back his hand and stop his anger from growing into hate. Perhaps one day, when each person learns to reach out an open hand, without the rock, without the sword, without the gun, maybe then the entire world can be saved. And in God's garden called earth, all will be good again. Here ends the Midrash.